Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Nicci Chats 2. So I am doing this a little bit earlier this week because I was absolutely desperate to chat to Stephanie and she wasn't available tomorrow. So I shifted things earlier and I'm hosting this today. So for those of you who don't know me, I run a company called The Y Effect and I'm all about business growth and changing people's perspectives. And the reason why I started this show was to bring in people who I think have got interesting points of view to share that might help you think about things slightly differently. And today I am talking to my friend Stephanie Wright, who I think has not only a very fascinating story, but she also has a lot of experience in the transformation space. And I wanted to sort of dig more into that and have a conversation with her. So Stephanie runs a company called Agora Leadership. And welcome, Stephanie. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Nicci. Thanks for the invite and the chat and the opportunity. Appreciate
Wonderful.
it.
So, Stephanie, before we get into the more sort of juicy transformational stuff, talk to me about your journey and how you got to where you are as a US citizen living in Paris, the industries you've worked in, and why you feel so passionately about transformation.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's homegrown in my DNA. So I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan in the US, and it's really a city built on grit and resilience. And anybody that knows anything about Detroit, really a city of transformation over the decades. And my family's from there. So when I say it's in my DNA, it really is. I was raised with this idea that seeking experience and being curious and what comes out of that and reflecting on it is how you grow and how you get better and how you really get a rich life. So I think when you ask, where did it come from? I think it really comes from my background. And because I was born and raised in Detroit, I went into automotive early on in my career in supply chain and purchasing. And, in the automotive world 20 plus years ago, being 9 times out of 10 the only female in that atmosphere, I was a little bit cheeky and sassy. So, I was actually, surprisingly enough, I had the opportunity to work for a lot of women leaders in my time in automotive, working for Ford Motor Company, and they encouraged it. And I know that didn't happen a lot 20, 25 years ago. So from a very early start, I had great women leaders encouraging me to be me. And I think that helped in this continue to be curious and continue to seek out, experience. And that journey led me to change roles and work for another chemical company, Henkel. And then that brought me to Europe, my career. And it was always this pattern of why not? Don't say no. What's, decision and choice, and learning to grow from, what you're experiencing. Risky, not risky. I'm a risk taker. I like jumping out of airplanes. So that kind of led this story of transformation and what got me here to Europe. And I've been here now 10 years. American living here with my family, and my husband's European. I'm a stepmom to a teenager. Talk about transformation at its finest. That being the stepmom and witnessing my beautiful teenager grow up is awesome. And then I'm a mom of twin 5-year-olds, another huge transformation in my life. Being a working executive and then becoming a mom of twins. Supply chain at its finest, I always say. And then just last year, I transitioned, I don't say out of corporate, but I would say I transitioned to a different relationship with corporate, and started my own organization, my own company that works with organizations all over the globe now to really approach leadership and transformation with a more mindful attitude. And the pandemic, I think, has just highlighted this importance of, we have to bring it back down to human spirit a little bit. So I'm really enjoying what I'm doing now in that transformational space.
That's fantastic. So Nina has just commented, "Hi,
Yeah.
Nina. It's wonderful to have you." She says, "I love what you say about being shaped by our life conditions.
Hmm.
So these things being a part of our DNA and actually
Hmm.
being within us, and
Hmm.
sort of always like I couldn't help but go into this space." So Stephanie, one of the things that you and I have touched on is, I mean, we spoke about, do you make coffee to caffeinate or do you make coffee to connect?
Hmm.
What do you think where do you think the bridge is between connecting people and when you look at environments that need to be transformed but aren't necessarily ready for transformation?
Hmm.
How do you think those two areas fit together in this notion of creating connection and then actually leveraging that to transform an environment?
Yeah, I think it's all about synergy, right? I mean, it's
Mm,
this dance we do in life, with ourselves, with
mm,
our peers, with our team. If you're a new leader or an experienced leader, but just in a new environment. And
mm,
I think this connection, it's such a strong, simple word.
mm,
I think connect with self. I think that's the beauty of this time we've all had over the last couple of years, is be able to connect with ourselves and,
mm,
challenge and question
mm,
and really go back to this root of who we are. We hold
mm,
so much wisdom inside of us. And I think that connecting back into yourself and your experience and your values, your purpose, all of these words that are now becoming very popular, which is great,
mm,
um, allows us then to be centered to connect with those around us. And that's why I think leaders right now are in such a critical position to really enhance this connection that everybody is tapping into themselves and now
mm,
seeking out with their environment. And I say we're the weavers or the maestros. So there's all these people that want to play instruments, and we all want a beautiful music, and we're seeking that purpose and value of
mm,
this new work experience that we're all talking about. And the leaders today have the opportunity to connect those sounds together and influence the tone and the tempo, in order to really change the future of work, which is now. I mean, the future is a minute
mm,
from now,
mm.
right? I think it's not a couple of years from now. It's really now that we have that opportunity to take this position that we were privileged enough to get.
Mm, mm. That's such an interesting way of looking at it. That this is a privilege,
Hmm.
as opposed to a curse, because it has been
Hmm.
a very difficult time. A lot of people have experienced a lot of difficulties financially, personally, in so many ways. But when you look at it that way, it actually has been a privilege,
Hmm.
in a from a point of view of connecting. So what advice would you give if you were working with a person in a leadership position and you can see all of this playing around you and you're playing out around you and you've got all these people that are playing these instruments and connecting? What advice would you give to somebody to say, this is how you can hone in on this? This is how you can take advantage of what is happening around you.
Yeah, I think, we can always take advantage of our surroundings.
Mm, mm,
I think a lot of times we don't use the opportunities we're given. I mean,
mm.
somebody asked me the other day, Stephanie, how do you start to be more mindful? And I said, well, you just start. The curiosity is how it gets started, right? So how
Mm,
do you start to make connection, and this synergy is just start to be curious about the people you're talking to. I mean, even Nicci, you mentioned to me in a conversation once, is get curious about the story that's going to come out of it. I loved that.
mm,
And as a leader, get curious about what is this dynamic environment we're now in. Nobody has the experience of how to deal with it.
mm,
All of us are new to it on every level. across the board. So what a beautiful time to say, okay, let's all pool our collective intelligence to build something that matters out of it. Because nobody that I've met, at least, is expert in living through pandemics and modern pandemics and how to work through this and to ensure that there's a connectivity that comes out of it. And I think we're all on a more even playing field to be able to have those dialogues with each other.
That's interesting. So we've got quite an interesting question here from my friend Oriente, who runs a fantastic company that works in this social enterprise around encouraging local food. She does local food deliveries called Menu Box. She says that we have young profiles in our companies, and that seems very difficult for them to connect with themselves. They want proof all the time, and I see that they lose authenticity. So how can we create synergy? Do you have any words of advice for Oriente around that?
Yeah, sure. So part of what Agora does as well is supports young leaders, specifically the DE&I space. So different color, creed, race, religion, etc. But young leaders to say, even questioning what is authenticity to you. And I think, there's a lot of pressure on young leaders to solve the future, right? We say, oh, you have it all in your hands. And I think, talk about the pressure cooker they're
That's
under,
so
right? And instead of, simple questions that I ask my young clients sometimes are, what purpose do you want to have in what you do? And I think a lot of times when you link back to young professionals' purpose and ask them to be able to discover and clarify and get curious about their own values, they tend to fall into this cozy space of what authenticity means. It's a really big word for a 24-year-old. And in the sense of neurologically, even your brain is just finally fully developed in your early 20s. So now you're here to try to understand how you want to proceed with a purpose-driven life. And I think that's the beauty of what's coming out of the younger generation going into the workforce is saying, I want to make sure I have a checks and balance of what matters. And I think that's a powerful curiosity that we as more experienced leaders have like I said, the privilege to be able to give back to them some tools to be able to find their way.
I think that's wonderful. And, it's so interesting that this point that you raise about this pressure that young people are under to save the world. I mean, I've never thought about that. And it really isn't something I've ever considered, but yet I have worked with so many, particularly young entrepreneurs who are very focused on social businesses because they do have to save the world. And I never actually considered the amount of pressure that it's putting them under. But Stephanie, there's a very common theme in what you're talking about here, and a lot of it centers around curiosity. Actually getting curious about ourselves, getting curious around the people, about the people around us, getting curious about what certain words mean to us, and how we use them, and how we delve into them, and how we're going to move forward with them. So how would you suggest that people in leadership positions, whether they older, more experienced, or younger, people like Orient, actually start to mentor or start to coach people around transformation and around working with people who are different to them, whether it be gender diversity, whether it be people of color, people of different sexual orientations? I mean, there's just, it can be a little bit of a minefield at the moment. So how would you suggest people go about that?
Yeah, I try to simplify it in, getting curious about diverse thought. I think that's more digestible. And it also covers every human. It's, making sure that in these stages going forward that the dialogue is with all of us. And, being able to seek out diverse thought, which challenges then your own thought, which then allows you to grow. And I think right now we're all sitting in these little bubbles and pools of people that think like us and talk like us and act like us. And I think we're missing out on the dialogue with people that are different and to expand our networks. And I think that's the beauty of now with technology. You can immerse yourself in different dialogue and atmosphere with an open mindset every day in internet exchanges. And again, but I say you do it mindfully, because you need to go into those spaces with an open mind to understand that when you do surround yourself with diverse thought, you will grow out of it if you stay curious. If you shut down, if you start, having your own biases, if you have your own, your triggers, etc., then it goes south pretty fast. And I think part of that lies in this emotional intelligent pillar of self-awareness. So a lot of times I'll seek out a diverse discussion in order to see what is my reaction. Am I just saying that I'm an open-minded person? But I'm observing my own maybe physical reaction to a topic. And then I reflect on it afterwards and say, so am I really as open-minded as I think I am? What was that reaction I had? And then you rinse and repeat that reflection and self-aware, and then you go back into it. And I think that's when you start to broaden this mindset of really transforming, and then transforming the people, organizations. And it just leads to then the work that you do. But I think it really is about yourself first in order to bring that out then to your environment and the people that you're impacting.
It's very interesting. So it's transformation, not unlike mindfulness, it's a practice. It's not necessarily, it's not a destination. You're never going to get to that point where it's like, done, check, I'm there, I can move on. It's actually something that we need to work on continuously. I really like that. So there was something that you and I spoke about briefly offline, and you have touched on it now. It's really around, we've all experienced, maybe not directly ourselves, but this great resignation that's going on, and people are reflecting on what they want out of their lives, and looking to change their circumstances and moving into different positions, possibly starting their own companies, possibly doing something completely different. And this notion of moving from, as you very succinctly put it, the vice president to having no title, which is probably, I think a lot of us that have worked in companies, it's one of the shocks of our lives when all of a sudden you become the CEO, the cleaning lady, the tea lady, the tax consultant, and you handling all of these things. So when you find yourself in that position, when leadership has taken on a new meaning, and what happens then? How do I move forward? When there isn't necessarily this direct pressure, and it can become very even more easy for me to get stuck in this bubble.
Yeah, I think from my own experience with it, right? Because I think that was the unexpected dialogue that I had when I transitioned into a different relationship with corporate. After 20 years there, is I sat down and I had a dialogue with my ego.
I love that.
And I said, what is this about? I still have the same intelligence. I still have the same network, maybe even the opportunity to have a greater impact. So what is this I don't have a title anymore. Or even when I was creating my own title, which was a very interesting, interesting activity. And I think it allowed to get focused and be humble. And that brought me to really tuning into my sense of purpose and this synergy between purpose at work and purpose personally, and realizing it's all in one. And if you can really define and tap into that, that's the power that comes along with it that I think we tend to lose sometimes. And the synergy of really being and doing the same thing. Because so many times we're doing one thing, but we're being another way. So, when I quote unquote lost the title, I found more clarity of my purpose.
That's so interesting. And I love what you say about this. These things are no longer separate. They actually become kind of one thing, your purpose, and this curiosity around pushing yourself and pushing yourself to achieve things. Stephanie, I want just to sort of go a little bit off here, but I know, as you said, you've worked in very male-dominated areas and probably come up against a lot of resistance. What advice would you give to somebody who is you at 25, 26, facing these challenges, are in those environments where they are just butting their heads against the wall and having to work 10 times harder than their possibly male counterparts just to prove themselves, are feeling the effects of pay parity, knowing they're not getting paid as much as the next person? What if you could kind of bit of a coaching mentoring session, what advice would you give to somebody in that position, or even a person of color?
Own your voice. That's the simple statement I say to some clients that are in that situation, that I say to myself still, is really own your voice and trust it, be confident in it. And for me, what I was true to myself throughout my career in those situations specifically, I did have some very jarring experiences that I would sit back and just say, that just happened. And I would not take it in a victim mentality, but more of a, how do I create an environment that never happens again? And how can I foster a dialogue with those people that were in that environment at the time to ensure that they are educated as well, to know that is not the environment that I will either accept or thrive in, etc. And I think by owning our voice, we are also being very brave and we're being courageous. There's so many people out there right now cheering on and saying, be brave, be courageous, use your voice, own your voice. And that's why we're seeing, I believe, really this huge shift. When every day I see in the news another CEO female, or from the LGBTQ community. And I think that's fantastic that you see organizations really saying, okay, it's no longer a goal. It's no longer a target. It's actually living and breathing. And I think that's because we're pushing. So I think to bottom line or simplify that is that if you are a young female or a young person of color and you're in a situation that is not acceptable, you call it out and you own your voice and you take a stand for what you believe in. And I think that's the, that goes into this aligning with who you are and your synergy in your professional and personal life. It's one life. They're not separate.
They're not separate. Absolutely.
Right. And if you
Yeah.
wouldn't bring it up in your personal life to a discussion, why wouldn't you do it at work? And I think then it keeps you aligned with who you are.
Yes.
And there isn't this internal dialogue or battle of, you shouldn't say that at work, or you shouldn't ruffle anybody's feathers, or, and you take with what comes, because sometimes you're going to have people that don't agree. Or you might say, one time I was told I was too American in a meeting. And I kind of was like, okay, I'll take that as a compliment. I don't know. But
what did you do?
After digesting the comment, I actually realized the opinion of that person didn't matter. And it just floated away.
Okay.
And I think that's about being self-aware. Not everything that people, and I say this to young professionals as well, or all my clients really, in my individual sessions, is not everything that somebody says to you has to stick. And if you're grounded in who you are as a leader, as a professional, I was even having this dialogue with one of my individual clients who's in her 60s and taking on new challenges and transforming herself and her career. And it's, we, at every stage of our life until we leave this planet, we're transforming into something, and we can choose what that is.
That's wonderful. I mean, I love what you say about not everything has to be a fight. Sometimes you just actually have to, what your opinion doesn't matter. If I'm being professional and I know I'm being professional and I've got the self-awareness to do that, I can just let it slide. Just out of interest and for my own benefit.
Yeah.
How did you, I mean, you've worked in some pretty hardcore industries. I mean, these are not the, I hate to use the term, but almost the softer industries. When you are approaching one of these very difficult dialogues, I mean, I would imagine you often worked with the kind of people where you couldn't necessarily sit down and go, when you say this, it makes me feel the following way. Because I would just be like, what are you talking about, woman?
Right.
How did you confront, because a lot of people do find confrontation quite difficult. And, when you are, I almost want to say the underdog, you can be very intimidated. How did you kick off those conversations?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. So, I've been in purchasing, so I've negotiated my entire life.
Okay.
And, especially in supply chain as well, it's all about relation management and, pushing towards the same goal.
Yes.
And it's about subtle influence. And influencing is one of my core values. So I think in that type of situation, especially let's say in a strong negotiation, I'll use an example with a partner in Central Eastern Europe. And I was the first American, first female this person was negotiating with. And I went into that meeting aware of that. And so I knew there had to be some type of connection before the confrontation. And it's a little bit of, it takes a little bit of homework, but if you can go into what you think will be a confrontation and first think of a connection, sometimes the confrontation isn't as powerful as it needs to be. It can be, this is as easy as, aligning and understanding where the person grew up, or, having a coffee, the coffee is to connect. A lot of times in negotiations, I would be the guest and I would get up and there would be coffee at the side table. And I would say, can I get you a coffee? And the person would look at me like, why are you making me a coffee? And it was just releasing some of those stereotypes of barriers because I was in the power seat and they weren't. And, breaking down to say, no, we're just humans trying to figure out how to do business together. And I think that ability to connect before confronting is something that I used, and that was then successful throughout my career.
That's so interesting. And I mean, there are a couple of really, really pertinent points that you make there. I mean, for starters, it's the value, and I've been seeing this more and more. I've never done those type of negotiations, but I'm learning the value of actually having negotiation skills, even though you might not traditionally need to be in that negotiator role like you did. The value of those skills in so many circumstances is just so incredibly powerful. So brush up on your negotiation skills. There are loads of resources out there. Chat to Stephanie, work on that. And also this sense of actually creating connection where there's, I mean, let's not call it conflict, but there could potentially be tension. And it just breaks those barriers down straight away when you connect with people. Stephanie, this is going to put you on the spot a little bit.
It's okay.
But do you feel that as women we are, because I mean, I'm a self-confessed feminist, that we are potentially better at building those connections and almost getting that kind of softer, nuanced approach of entering these situations?
Yep. I think we have been given the tools and opportunity to be better. So over time, it's an innate skill that we have. I think on the opposite of that, we have not fostered the development of the skills with our male counterparts. I have a son and a daughter. They're twins. And I spend as much time building the self-esteem of my daughter as I do building the soft skills of my son. And I think this is going to be a very important dialogue in the future, especially with more females getting into high leadership positions with the sustainability development goals, is that we also have to support the skills of our male counterparts, where they have been in their rhetoric of what it's like to be a male in a professional setting. So I think it has to be a dialogue from both sides. I think you mentioned, Nicci, tension, really good stuff can come out of tension. Creativity can come out of tension. This is order comes out of chaos. And we're a little bit chaotic right now. So here's our opportunity to create a different way of, skill set and understanding, and, having female mentors for young men. And I always laugh when I hear mentoring programs pop up in organizations, and it's all these young women with corporate men as mentors. And again, a lot of knowledge and wisdom there. One of my mentors is a male figure who is near and dear to my heart. But I challenge organizations to say, flip it around. Who are the women professionals and leaders that are mentoring the younger, not even younger, but men in general? And how can we make this skill set and this dialogue share with one another in order to progress the whole? So I think that's a long answer, but a short answer is yes. I think we have a stronger skill set because we have been using it, in different ways. But every human is wired to be empathetic.
I love that. And I mean, there are a couple of points there that you touched on that I just think are so wonderful. And I mean, firstly, this is one of the reasons why I find talking to you so inspiring, because I mean, this is probably now the second or third time in this conversation where there's an opportunity in something that isn't traditionally seen as good. There's creativity and tension, there's order and chaos. And I love, and I find it so inspiring that you constantly I don't know whether it just comes naturally or whether it's a skill that you've honed, but you seem to constantly be looking for where's the opportunity in this, where's the opportunity in that. And I think it's amazing. But I also love what you're saying about this. If we actually pull together, we can almost, in a way, create a perfect person. When you take the skills that one person has that might be different to somebody else, that could be different to a third person, when you bring that together, and it's actually all of those skills that we need to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that notion of understanding how we can actually all complement each other,
Mm-hmm.
and there's complements within our diversity. And Stephanie, this leads me. So we spoke just before we came online about this notion of diversity of thought,
Mm-hmm.
and what it means for companies in the future. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think, and you were leading it beautifully, is the collective intelligence, right? The collective whole. Surrounding yourself with different, it's how a puzzle becomes a picture, is this pieces together, right? To say, I want to surround myself with people that are stronger in this area. I am courageous enough to say, I'm strong here. This is what I own. This is what I can bring to the pot. And I think that's important to know your value. But then also to say, imagine my value and your value together. What's possible there? And even with, I always say, even with the pessimist viewpoint, and, you can hear that a lot in dialogues on team. Oh, that person's always in a bad mood, or etc. And I've done in my own career, and then helping organizations of, well, what's the value of the pessimist view?
Mm-hmm.
It's just about shifting perspective, because there could be very good ideas and what if scenarios in the pessimist view to prepare for. And especially my career in supply chain, it was always about preparing for scenarios that you couldn't even imagine, making impossible things possible. And so, when you seek out diverse thought and diverse ways of leading or being or intelligence or emotions, you say, okay, now we have now we have all the ingredients, right? Now we have something that we can really cook. And it's even saying, when you're rolling out a plan or a transition within a corporation, I always say, challenge the culture. Talk to the people that love the idea and talk to the people that hate the idea. Get all the ingredients in the pot, because that's when you can start to really understand how and what you need to do to fulfill the vision that you're trying to work towards. And I think this diverse thought is the easiest way to materialize it or make it a micro habit, right? We can all seek out every single day a diverse thought. I even do it with my 5-year-olds, right? When they're saying, I don't want to do this. And instead of saying, no, you have to do it, you say, well, why? Why don't you want to do it? And these are little micro habits to have the same dialogue in the office when somebody says, you know what, I don't agree with what you're saying. And instead of having a visceral reaction of, how can you not agree with me? You get curious to say, okay, well, why don't you agree with me? What's behind there? What's what's the story behind it?
Yeah.
And that's where innovation comes from. And that's where progress comes from.
Oh, I love that. And I mean, it's fundamentally, the older I get, the more I'm becoming a fan of curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think the scary thing is, the older we get, the more we lose our curiosity. I mean, I'm sure you can see it with, having a teenager and young kids, 5-year-olds, even just the difference in curiosity from 5 to being a teenager is vast. You've got 5-year-olds who are constantly poking at things and picking them up and feeling them and digging in the sand and asking a million questions. And even as a teenager, it gradually falls away. And as we get older, but I think we need to kind of get back to that, embracing our inner 5-year-olds and getting curious.
And I think we're even seeing that shift too. There's a lot of dialogue out there right now about the baby boomer generation being a very important generation in the future of organizations and work. And the wisdom that people over 60 have, and that they are getting curious. You know, there's a tech firm out in California that is hiring engineers 65 plus years old to bring in a different perspective, to bring in a different way of thinking. It's the largest generation the world has. There's so much intelligence. They are curious. They are of, looking and seeing and trying to understand how they can still make an impact. And they can. And I think this is a huge untapped resource. There's a lot of great people right now, especially in Europe, that are working on shining light on this untapped wisdom that is still so necessary in the workforce.
That's wonderful. And it's such an interesting point because, I've never thought about the diversity or transformation from an age perspective. You kind of, there's very specific, and maybe this is one of the things that I love about this topic, that there are actually so many layers to this whole notion of transformation, that it's not just about gender and color and sexual orientation, that there's actually age, and I mean, it's just massive. It's just, but yeah, I think that's wonderful. And it's so great that people are kind of moving in that direction. Stephanie, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It has been so fantastic to chat to you. I was going to make coffee, but I didn't. So I'm sticking with my
I have my little tea today.
You've got your tea, and I know you're not feeling well. So thank you so much for being here and just sharing this incredible wisdom. I think this is probably one of the most information-packed chats that I've had so far. It's just, I mean, even I'm going to have to go back and watch the recording to get down everything you said. Yeah, everything you said and spoke about. Is there one final thought that you would like to leave with everybody?
Yeah, I think if anything, I mean, maybe a final thought on, our relationship and you bringing the dialogue to the table. And I think that's the encouragement is, let's keep talking and keep having the dialogue. And, thank you for calling it wisdom. I call it just, again, sharing my experience. And I think that's what I want to leave people with is be bold enough to share your experience. As you said, Nicci, be, curious enough to hear somebody else's story and, and listen to it. Don't judge it, listen to it. And I think these types of conversations walk the talk on that one. So thank you.
So those are the action points for the next few weeks for everybody. Get curious, ruffle feathers, and be bold.
There we go. Excellent. Deal. I'm in.
Done. Stephanie, thank you so much. And thanks you for everybody who joined us and asked questions. They were wonderful. I hope you all have a wonderful day, a rest of the week, and stay safe. And I will see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.